I don't think anybody will question whether or not Secretary Perry's a high energy guy, that's for sure. Great guy, wrong football team, but that's probably for another day. On top of Energy Week and everything that Secretary Perry and other cabinet members have on the agenda for that, we've got a full schedule of events and actions from the President's cabinet today on everything from global human trafficking to assistance funding for small communities. This morning, Ivanka Trump joined Secretary Tillerson at a State Department event releasing the 2017 Trafficking in Persons Report. As Ivanka said this morning, human trafficking is a human rights issue that affects millions, and this report is an important tool for the administration to combat this tragic problem. The full report is available on the State Department website. I encourage you guys to take a look. Also this morning, the Department of Veterans Affairs Secretary Shulkin hosted a meeting of robotics experts for a robotics and healthcare roundtable. The VA is embarking on the largest transformation and modernization effort in recent history, and part of that will be developing a robust robotics program within the department. Yesterday, the Interior Department announced a record $464.6 million allocation to help small communities, further demonstrating the Trump administration's commitment to all Americans. In states like Utah, which received nearly $40 million, and Nevada, which received $26.2 million, these investments are an important part of the federal government's role as land manager and neighbor to local communities, including many of those that play a big role in feeding and powering our nation. Many of these small communities in states like Nevada are also being hit particularly hard as healthcare insurance premiums rise and insurers flee their Obamacare exchanges. It's because of the people who will have no choice for themselves or their families that it's so critical that the Senate votes to repeal and replace Obamacare. Every day a new announcement is made that puts health insurance out of reach for thousands of Americans, whether insurers are hiking up rates or leaving markets entirely. Today, the Vice President is on the Hill to attend the Senate policy lunch and hold additional meetings, and he'll be hosting senators at dinner tonight in his residence. Both the President and the Vice President are fully engaged with the Senate and are helping to create a consensus that will push this bill over the finish line. As Sean said yesterday, the President talked extensively with several Republican members over the weekend, including Senators Cruz, Paul, Capito, and Johnson. He spoke to Senator McConnell this morning, and he's invited all Republican senators to the White House later this afternoon to continue these discussions. The President is optimistic that Republicans will live up to the promise that they've been making to the American people for 7 years by repealing and replacing Obamacare. I know you guys are probably a little bit tired since we've been here a while, so do you want to skip on the questions? Figured it was worth a shot, and with that, I'll take your questions. Charlie?
Recently, Breitbart News challenged the accuracy of the CNN story, and afterwards it was retracted, deleted, and the editors responsible were fired, as well as the network apologized for the story. One of the targets of the story, accept the apology. The President went on Twitter this morning and repeated that CNN was fake news. Why isn't their response good enough for the President?
I don't know that it's that the response isn't good enough for the President. I think it's the constant barrage of fake news directed at this President probably that has garnered a lot of his frustration. You point to that report. There are multiple other instances where that outlet that you referenced has been repeatedly wrong and had to point that out or be corrected. There's a video circulating now. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know, but I would encourage everybody in this room and frankly everybody across the country to take a look at it. I think if it is accurate, I think it's a disgrace to all of media, to all of journalism. I think that we have gone to a place where if the media can't be trusted to report the news, then that's a dangerous place for America. And I think if that is the place that certain outlets are going, particularly for the purpose of spiking ratings, and if that's coming directly from the top, I think that's even more scary and certainly more disgraceful. And I hope that that's not the direction we're headed. I hope that outlets that have continued to use either unnamed sources, sometimes stories with no sources at all. We've been going on this Russia-Trump hoax for the better part of a year now with no evidence of anything. Things like the success at the VA barely get covered. They may get covered for an hour at a time, but this story gets covered day in, day out. And I think America is frankly looking for something better. They're looking for something more. And I think they deserve something better from our news media.
Does the president actually expect? Does the president actually expect us not to report on stories of a foreign country trying to influence the presidential election?
I don't think it's that it's expected that you're not to report on, again, actual news if there's something there. But again, I think that there are a lot of things happening in this world that frankly a lot of people would like to hear about, whether it's job growth, whether it's deregulation, whether it's tax reform, health care. I think a lot of those things deserve a lot more coverage than they get. And all we're saying is, I think that we should take a really good look at what we are focused on, what we are covering, and making sure that it's actually accurate and it's honest. If we make the slightest mistake, the slightest word is off, it is just an absolute tirade from a lot of people in this room. But news outlets get to go on day after day and cite unnamed sources, use stories without sources, have, you mentioned the Scaramucci story where they had to have reporters resign.
Come on, you're inflaming everybody right here, right now with those words. This administration has done that as well. Why in the name of heavens? Any one of us, right, are replaceable, and any one of us, if we don't get it right, the audience has the opportunity to turn the channel or not read us. You have been elected to serve for 4 years at least. There's no option other than that. We're here to ask you questions.
Right.
You're here to provide the answers. And what you just did is inflammatory to people all over the country who look at it and say, see, once again, the president is right and everybody else out here is fake media. And everybody in this room is only trying to do their job.
Well, I disagree completely. First of all, I think if anything has been inflamed, it's the dishonesty that often takes place by the news media. And I think it is outrageous for you to accuse me of inflaming a story when I was simply trying to respond to his question. Kevin.
Thank you, Sarah. I just rapid fire because I know we've had a bit of a long briefing here. Would it be fair to, let me ask you this way, how would you describe the president's mood on health care? Concerned, still encouraged, and what did you make of the CBO score, if you talked to him about that? And then secondly, I'm going to ask you about the warning to Syria. What's the message that the administration wants to convey, not just to the world community, but also to the American people who see headlines like that and they wonder, are we hurtling headlong into a major situation in that part of the world?
I'll start with healthcare first. Obviously, we're continuing to be optimistic. The president is committed, as he said, and all the members of the administration have said repeatedly, to repealing and replacing Obamacare, working with the Senate, working with the House, making sure we get the best bill. For us, it's never been about the timeline, but about getting the best piece of legislation that helps the most Americans. And that's what we're continuing to do day in, day out. That's the reason the president has asked members of the Senate to come here today, so that they can talk through that, so that they can figure out the best way to move the ball forward. That's the goal of the meeting this afternoon, and that's the goal of the administration. In terms of the CBO score, as we said yesterday, the CBO is a budget office, and while it does very well at times predicting things on budget, whether it's revenue or spending, I don't think it does a great job, and I think the administration's been clear and consistent that we don't always agree that it does a great job predicting coverage. I think we saw that given their history. They projected that Obamacare, there would be 24 million people that were part of that. There were only 11, and that number is dropping every day. So I don't have a lot of confidence in that number on that part, but I do think that some of the places where they do a good job again are on the budget and the revenue side, and the CBO score that they pointed out was that it would cut deficits by $300 billion and cut taxes by $700 billion. I think those are good things, and I think when they focus on the budget side, that's probably a good thing. And I think you had a second part, sorry.
The warning to Syria, what's your message to the international community and also to the American people who may be concerned when they read a headline like that that they're thinking, well, we may be hurtling toward a situation that involves the U.S. in that part of the world?
I think that the message from the statement yesterday was extremely clear. I don't think it was a gray area. It was pretty black and white. Major.
Can you explain, because you went on the record this morning, what the process was that led to that statement last night? Were members of the team at the State Department or the Defense Department taken aback by that statement, or were they fully involved? Can you give us an idea of how the process internally worked to deliberate that statement and then create the statement for public release?
I can tell you that leadership from the State Department, DOD, DNI, the CIA, as well as members of the administration within this building were part of that process from the very beginning and fully aware.
Can you give us a timeline from the very beginning? Was that a yesterday or?
I'm not going to walk through the detailed process of a timeline on how that was released for intelligence purposes.
You just said you accept or find valid the CBO numbers on the budget side. Is that true throughout?
They're a budget.
Assessment yesterday?
They're a budget office, and I think on the initial numbers that we saw from that, the cutting of the deficit, the cutting of taxes, I think that that's where historically they've been more accurate as well. It's not just my, like I've decided that, but historically that's where they've been.
For purposes of the public looking at this, would this administration accept the budget and revenue numbers that were published yesterday as generally speaking valid and worth taking seriously?
I would think so for the most part. I think in large, yes. Jennifer?
Two things, one on Google and one on the economic forecast. So European officials have slapped Google with this $2.7 million fine. Is the White House cool with European regulators hitting a U.S. company with a fine when our own Federal Trade Commission hasn't accused them of anti-competitive behavior?
At this point, I don't have anything for us to weigh in on the regulations of a private company, but if anything changes, I'll let you know.
Okay,
Kristen?
On the International Monetary Fund, so they lowered their forecast for U.S. Economic growth down to 2.1%, which is lower than what the president has been hoping for. Can you share some reaction on what you think about this new IMF forecast?
I haven't had a chance to dig into that, but we'll certainly circle back with you on it. Jim Stinson?
Sarah, you called on me, Sarah.
Oh, sorry. Jim, let me take Kristen. I did call on her, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. If Syria is poised to launch another chemical weapons attack, isn't that an acknowledgement that the airstrikes in April didn't work, Sarah?
Look, I think that our goal every day is to do what we can to protect life in all forms and to take steps to move the ball forward in defeating ISIS, defeating all efforts of terrorism, and I think the statement yesterday helped do that.
Why will a paper statement work, though, when airstrikes didn't dissuade Bashar al-Assad?
I don't know that it didn't, based on what we know at this point.
And just to follow up very quickly, was there a principals meeting, a deputies meeting before that statement was issued by Sean Spicer last night?
I know that there was a routine meeting that took place yesterday. I don't believe that there was anything beyond that yesterday. Jim?
Sarah, two questions, just like NBC. Given the news about CNN's...
Be careful letting NBC set your standard there, Jim.
Given the news about CNN's erroneous story about Anthony Scaramucci, does the White House believe there are other Russia-related stories from major outlets that have not been retracted and are just as false, including the February 14th story in the New York Times about collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, which James Comey called into question, which many believe the CNN story was based upon?
I would have to look back at that specific story. There have been many by the New York Times that I would probably disagree quite a bit with. I think you could take it pretty straightforward that this administration disagrees with all of the stories that claim that the president and his campaign colluded with Russia in any capacity. So I think he's been extremely clear that he believes that's a hoax, and certainly something that's not true and didn't take place. And any story related to that, you would, I think, find frustration from this team here.
For the CNN retraction, does the White House now believe the news media have an obligation to review stories on the Russian Trump issue and retract questionably sourced stories on the topic?
I'm sorry? I'm not following the...
Do you believe that the media should go back and look at anonymously sourced stories on Russia and Trump, and maybe start a review process and retract where necessary.
I think that'd be a great idea. I certainly don't think that you would get arguments from us if there were retractions from outlets on fake stories. But I also think that, there's a moment where we can all do better. And I certainly think that's what we strive to do every day. And hopefully that's the goal. I know it is of many, and hopefully it will continue to be of not just the news media, but everybody involved in the process to continue to do better, to continue to strive for excellence, and to continue to deliver the best we can for the American people.
On your question, Kristen.
Two healthcare questions. Okay, so you accept the budgetary calculations of the CBO, but not the projections on how many people would be insured. What about their projections on what would happen to premiums and deductibles? Is that something you accept or not accept?
I think they said yesterday that the premiums would go down roughly 30% by 2020. That seems, based on what we've done internally, pretty consistent. So.
For people of certain incomes, they would go way up. So you only accept them if they go down?
No, but I think in general and largely they predicted that they'd go down 30% by 2020.
Okay, and then another question. The president promised that his health care plan would not have cuts to Medicaid. Does he believe that a family of four making $60,000 makes too much money to qualify for Medicaid? In other words, that's just too high an income to be getting Medicaid?
I don't know about a specific level breakdown. And again, there's a reason he's bringing senators over here today to talk through. We know there's going to be changes. We know there's going to be adjustments. The thing that the president was committed to is making sure that anybody that currently receives Medicaid, that's not touched. And that is consistent with what's in the bill, and that'll continue to be what he fights for.
Does he believe, he said the House bill was too mean. Does he believe that the Senate bill is less mean, as mean, more mean? Like, what does he think?
I honestly haven't asked him whether or not he thinks the Senate bill, the mood of it yet, but I'll check on that, Mara, and get back to you. Thanks, guys, so much. Have a good day.
Talk about CNN, Sarah. Can I ask you a question?